I want to talk now about what it's like to be a Newlane student. Take me through, what is it like to take a course? Are there tests? Do you meet other students? Do you interact with the teachers? Kind of describe what it's like to be a Newlane student.
So I do know there's a cohorts program where you can interact with other students. I have not taken advantage of that as of yet. Hopefully I will soon, but I haven't yet. It just hasn't fit into the schedule.
I get it. It sounds like it's very optional, so no problem.
Yeah. With this staff, they are always available. There's a little button on your screen and you can talk to somebody at any time. I also can know that I can email with any questions. I've emailed Ben a couple times at the very beginning, and I know that they're available, which makes a huge difference if I do have any questions. What I really like is everything is laid out so simple. With the different courses, you have course goals, you have lessons, and then you have the overall objectives. So if you're a learner, you learn by reading. There are lessons with text. If you learn by watching something, there are different lectures you can watch. There are so many different ways. So I go through all of them and I watch and read everything because I gain something different from each piece. And I love that the lectures are recorded because I can write it down. I can go back. It takes me 3 times as long to watch it, but I can get in deep and I can write it all down, which I really enjoy. And then occasionally when you're reading a philosophy text and it's really deep, you start losing your way and you start focusing on something different. You can always go back to those goals and objectives, and it puts you back where you're supposed to be. So I love that it's laid out so simple.
So that you're reading something and you're drifting, but you're like, okay, what am I supposed to be getting out of this? And you go back to the objectives, you see, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be learning. And now you can pull that out of the text as you're reading, and it kind of keeps you focused. That's really smart.
Yes, exactly. And then there's also a section where you can take notes right there. I don't utilize that. I take notes on paper. When I write it down, it cements in my brain a little bit better, but that option is there. So if you need to quickly note something, it's all right there. It's really, really simple.
All right. So you're going through these objectives, you're learning each thing, you're watching videos, you're reading books, reading essays, whatever materials that you need to learn stuff. And then what happens? How do you pass off your learning and finish the class?
Yeah. At the end of each objective, there are assignments you can go through, and most of them are fairly long papers you write and break down on each objective, which I find is super helpful because then I'm going back and addressing the objective and bringing it into the forethought of my thinking. And then when you've done that and you feel like you've self-mastered all of those goals, then you take a test. And all of it is just self-mastery. If you feel like you have it down, you can test on it.
Right.
And then you take that test. And what I really like about the test is if you don't pass it with 100%, you need to go back and redo it. You can't be done with it until you pass it 100%, but you have the opportunity to go back. So then you go back.
You can't fail, and you keep going until you essentially have 100% or an A. It's like you're going to get an A.
Until you, not just an A, but until you master it.
Until you master it.
And that's what's key for me, is mastering that information and going in to finishing the course knowing what I'm supposed to know, not cramming for a test, not knowing that I'm going to forget it the next day. I'm mastering the information.
Right. Or you think about, like, in a traditional, like in high school, in college, you might take a class and maybe you're not paying attention or you didn't study or whatever, and you get a C and you pass the class, but you didn't learn everything you were supposed to learn in the class. And it sounds like,
and then you're moving to the next level and you still didn't learn everything that you were supposed to learn.
And in this format, it sounds like it's not a big deal if you didn't pass, no problem. Just go learn what you need to learn so that you're going to ultimately, like, you're not going to pass the full class until you have in fact mastered everything you're supposed to master. There is no situation where you're like, well, I've mastered 50% of it, so I'm just going to move to the next class, or I've mastered 75% of it. No, you need to master 100% of it
There
And
is
then you can move on
no,
to the next class.
there's no C's get degrees here. You master it. You make sure that you have that information and it's cemented in so that you can move on.
I love that.
So I really like that. And then after the testing, you submit a course project. And the course projects, there are different options. You can do a paper, you can do the last one, I actually wrote the paper, but the option was you could do a video. You could verbally let the instructor know what you've mastered. I did the paper, and then you get feedback on the paper, which I love. And the feedback that I got it from Dr. Mintz, and the feedback was, I don't even know how long it took him. It was so intense, and I was so appreciative, all the little things that he took the time to point out.
So not just nice or
good job, you're done.
Good job, you're done, but real feedback helping you dig deeper into what you're learning.
Real feedback. And he approved that project, and all of that feedback I will take into my next paper, which I love. I love that I can go back and reference it. I love that I have access to it. So, and then after the project, you set up the course hearing.
Which you just did a course hearing.
Which I just did, yes. And it's a little bit terrifying and intimidating.
The course hearing is you're live with the professor.
Yes, just like this.
Just like this. And they're asking you questions about those objectives.
Yes, they're going to ask you the questions about the objectives, but not just questions, different scenarios. They are going to make sure that you have mastered those objectives. And sometimes it throws you for a little bit of the loop. You have to take a second and think, okay, now he asked me this. How do I apply this information in this scenario? Which really shows that you mastered it versus just regurgitating information.
Right. And is it the same thing as with the test we were talking about before? If you go to the course hearing and you know 75% of it, but you don't know 25%, what happens then?
Yes. So I have had 4 course hearings so far. 3 of them I passed the first time.
Nice.
The second one, excuse me, was with Ben, and it was Introduction to Philosophy. And I did great on everything. And then at the end, he said, there's this one thing that I'm not sure that you quite have mastered. And it was Plato, the Allegory of the Cave. And I'm never going to forget it, ever.
I get that Allegory of the Cave, yeah.
And he said, so go back and read it again and really master it, and then come back. And I went back and I took 2 days and I went through and made sure that I had that down. And there were a couple things that I realized I missed. And when he came back on, we set up another course hearing. And when he came back on, I said, oh my gosh, I have it. I know what I missed. I got it. And it was so much fun to be able to tell him what I missed. I know what I missed. I've got this.
Yeah.
So and it was really cool because I also had a cheerleader. I had somebody rooting for me, somebody who was just as excited that I was, that I got what I was supposed to out of it.
Ah, that's great.
So it's not a big deal. If you don't master it the first time, they're going to walk you through and give you tips. And even this last one, I passed it, but he said, here's a couple things I want you to think about going forward. So there's still some constructive criticism, which I like. It makes you better.
Right. You have more classes ahead of you and it just preps you for that. So that's great.
Yes.
That's great.
And I know going in, the courses are getting more intense, and I know that I'm going to need all the help that I can get.
That's right.